Change is easy. Transition is hard. Tommy Oesch from Swiss Lane Farms in Michigan shared that quote last year in our #1 episode of all time here at the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, as he talked about the 7,000 cows in 7 years vision that he and his next generation partners had set out for their dairy business. Well, Tommy's back with us today, and we are going to hear about a transition that he has personally made in the past 6 months, the transition from operations manager to visionary for Swiss Lane Farms, and find out how that original vision has scaled from 7,000 cows in 7 years to now a 10,000 cow business model by 2032, and how Swiss Lane plans to get there. This is real talk from Tommy about the changes and the challenges, and how he is up-leveling his own leadership right here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy farm owners, managers, and advisors who are committed to profitability, sustainability, and excellence. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to bring you the conversations that will up-level your skill set and your mindset so you can be a top performer in the dairy farming business. Now let's hear from Tommy Oesch from Swiss Lane Farms. This episode is sponsored by Uplevel Dairy Podcast founding partner Adisseo, a global leader in nutrition solutions and premier provider of rumen-protected methionine for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from components, and maintain the health of their high-performing herds. Feed is the greatest expense on any dairy operation, and don't you want to know how an adjustment to the ration will affect your bottom line? Adisseo empowers nutritionists to make informed ration balancing decisions with MilkPay.com. Customizable to your dairy's own data, this profitability calculator puts the power of real-time milk market information in the palm of your hand. Find out how much your latest ration change is really costing you with the free MilkPay app available on iOS and through MilkPay.com. I think it's been a good 6 months since we had you on the podcast, Tommy.
Yeah.
Some things have changed in your world. What's new?
So our business has continued to grow. Our goal is still by 2032 to be at 10,000 cows. We are now just cresting the 5,300 mark, which is right on target for our growth. The goal is 5,350 by the end of this year. We built a freestall barn to add 500 cows to one of our parlors that wasn't at capacity. And as we've kind of grown the business, really focused on the organization and the accountability structure of our business, I've been sitting in kind of a dual role as operations manager for all sites and the visionary role. And we've promoted one of the guys that has worked for us since 2011, so 13 years now. He has been promoted into the operations role, operations manager, and he's doing a really nice job. He handles operations. He's a lot better at accountability than I am, and he's more of a detail-oriented person, kind of has a leadership style that is actually better suited in a lot of ways. As an operations manager, I'm now solely in the visionary seat, which is really cool, but there's a lot of challenge there for me. And part of the challenge is our business big enough to really need a full-time visionary? All of my partners and co-managers, the rest of our leadership team has really kind of thought that this is the right path. And so I'm embracing the visionary role, trying to learn what are the things that I need to do and what are my giftings and areas of strength that I need to stay in to really move our company forward.
So I'm going to stop you where you're at here for a sec, Tommy. So your big change in the last 6 months was from splitting your time as operations manager and spending some of your day in this visionary leadership role. And now you're spending all of your time in that capacity. For a moment, explain to us, again, those that haven't heard all of our episodes with you before, what is the leadership team structure at Swiss Lane? And what does that visionary role really mean?
We follow the EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating System model for management. One of the big things that we focus on is our accountability structure. And a lot of people call that an organizational chart. We call it our accountability chart because really it's who's accountable to who and what. And on our leadership team, we have the visionary and the integrator. And the integrator is a detail person. Underneath the integrator in our business are the livestock manager, operations manager, finance manager, and people manager. So all those teams are under the integrator. I'm in the visionary role. Matt, my brother, is in the integrator role. He's really gifted when it comes to the finer details in the business. That's his strong suit. As a visionary, my job is the idea guy. I have lots of ideas and he's the critic, right? So, which is great because my ideas need to be vetted by a critic because most of them are bad.
And any good examples you can share of maybe a good idea and a bad idea that you've had in your visionary role?
I'm always trying to kind of tear the business apart and reconstruct it in my head. What can we do different? It's like, well, should we have an excavation business? And we pay a lot of people for trucking. Should we have a trucking business? And should we be processing our own milk and making our own product? There's all kinds of ideas that I'm bringing. But also, it's not all about doing more things. I think one of the better ideas that we have had is to actually simplify our business in order to grow, like focusing every dollar available on milking another cow. So recently we sold our cropping enterprise to 2 employees, 2 young guys that want to crop farm. And so we have our home dairy about 30 miles north of the herds that we've bought, the dairies we're leasing. And through that whole process, we learned that we could have somebody do a lot of custom farming for us, whether it's the packing or the manure hauling or the planting, harvesting, all that is in Battle Creek, which are our lease dairies. That's all custom done. And so it did give us confidence. We farmed for years, done all of our own manure hauling, chopping, planting, tillage, all of it. That's been something my dad and uncles did, my grandpa did. So it was pretty unnerving to think about selling that piece. And obviously you do that in a small farming community. There's lots of ideas about what that means for our business. It means that we're not good at it or we're failing somehow because we can't keep doing that part of the business. But we see it as a huge opportunity for us and for a couple guys that we're really rooting for them. They're going to go out and kill it. Like they've really started to already make inroads with some of the local farmers that are probably getting to an age and point in their careers where they're thinking about not having a successor. You know, these guys are that farm a couple hundred to a couple thousand acres that are looking for somebody young to come in. And these guys have really done a nice job developing those relationships. And so for us, that's great. We don't want to farm that ground. We would like to buy the feed from that ground and we would like to put manure on that ground. And so these guys are already making inroads in that capacity. We're really excited for that. So that all kind of took place really, I would say probably October 1st is kind of when we got the paper signed. So they bought the combines, did all the combining for us this fall, did a great job. They're doing the tillage and it's going really well. So excited about that.
So that was a big change to it. The whole business of Swiss Lane was offloading that cropping segment. The cool part, as you said, is you have people internally that were able to step up and take ownership of that. So a really cool partnership that you have or history that you have so that you can continue to do the things that you're good at and they can take this and hopefully run with it too. But it goes back to a line you shared earlier, Tommy, when you are looking at these decisions as the thinker and the creative leader at Swiss Lane, going back to a key phrase of every dollar, how can you reinvest it in a cow? Expand on that line or that philosophy.
Yeah. So, and I have to say, it goes back really 2019. We made kind of our first no matter what statement. It was like, no matter what, we're going to milk 7,000 cows in 7 years, right? Like we talked about the first time I was on with you. And when you make that no matter what statement, it changes your thought process and your decision making because you can't say, no matter what, we're going to milk 7,000 cows and we're going to have a trucking company and we're going to do the farming and we're going to raise the heifers and it's like either you're going to milk 7,000 cows or you're going to do these things alongside that. We're a few years in now to a succession plan. We're redeeming the equity for the senior partners, my dad and his two brothers. That's going really well. But at the same time, you can't do everything and be successful at it. So when we made that, no matter what, we're going to milk 7,000 cows. Like, well, that means there's some things we can't do. That's been a really key directive for us, focus. As I look at my peers in the business, people who have grown rapidly, a lot of them have done that. They focused all of their capital on a cow. And the hope is that you get to a certain spot and then, okay, now we can start to buy real estate. Or you have a kid coming back to the business, you've hit your growth targets with cows. Maybe there's at some point you do some more of your own things again. You raise some of the calves or whatever it is. But at this phase of our business, there's not enough dollars to afford us to do that.
That actually speaks to a word that you and I have talked about many times, and that's the word discipline. This is where the discipline comes into play as a leader, and that's the discipline of focus and staying true to the goal. As you mentioned, you and I had this 7,000 cows in 7 years vision conversation. That was the first time we had you on the podcast. The goal has been upped, the needle has been moved to a 10,000 cow vision. Catch us up on that, on the moving of the needle from the 7,000 cows in 7 years to the 10,000 cows by 2032.
Sure. So 7,000 cows in 7 years. At that time, we were milking 2,100 cows at the home farm with a double 16 parlor milking 1,600 cows and 8 robots milking 500 cows. We said, no matter what, we're going to get to 7,000 cows in 7 years. At that time, we didn't know, are we going to build a dairy at home? Are we going to expand this robotic dairy? Are we going to kind of build over top of the parlor and expand that? What we didn't really know how we were going to do it. All we knew is we had to do it. Then we got the opportunity to lease a dairy, talking with one of our financial advisors. He's been a really great resource for us over the years, always really honest about what he thinks is possible. And he doesn't advise us to do foolish things. But he's like, if you just keep doing what you're doing for the next 10, 15 years, you're just not going to have a lot left at the end. You're probably going to have a couple $100 a cow profit over the next 10 years. You're going to have some of this senior partner debt paid off, but not a lot of net worth growth, if you will, and equity growth. So he advised us, instead of, and at that time, and still, it's still true, building is just really expensive, especially to build a new milking facility, even a freestall barn. We figure with milk price where it is right now, we can pay off a cow in like 7 months. If we have to build a barn and buy a cow, it's 3 to 4 years. If you have to build a parlor, it's 7 years. That's kind of some rough math that right now we think is kind of guiding us. So we started looking around and making a lot of calls to anybody that we thought might be looking to exit the business or maybe had a couple dairies. Of course, we started with the ones closest to us and kind of expanded out and ended up leasing a dairy about 30 miles from home. Guy that both my brother and I had worked with, Matt, when he was working alongside Steve as a financial consultant, worked with this dairyman and said it was the phone call he'd been waiting for and praying for. We leased that dairy. And then in the meantime, we had started working with our utility to build a methane digester at the home farm. We had talked to another dairy about 5 miles from the one we leased in Battle Creek. The door was pretty much closed on that. We thought, especially after talking to the bank, they're like, you guys can handle one herd acquisition this year. Maybe in a year or two, we can look at another one. So our utility called and said, hey, we bought a dairy in Battle Creek and we would like you guys to milk the cows. We were like, well, that's great, but we are out of money. We've spent it all on this one opportunity. And they were able to creatively work with us to basically prepay us for manure to acquire that second herd of cows. It's a deal unlike any other deals in There's a lot of digester deals out there, kind of first of its kind, and maybe still the only of its kind where the utility actually owns the dairy. So we lease the dairy and all the cropland around it from the utility. They are putting solar panels on 1,000 acres of that ground all around that dairy. It's going to be called the Spring Creek Renewable Energy Center. So it'll have a digester that's handling the manure from both of those dairies. And it's a pretty neat deal. And
Wow.
so that all leads me to why 10,000 cows. In Michigan, we're under our NPDES permit, our environmental permit. We can go up to 3,500 cows under that permit. Now we have 3 sites with 3,500 cow permits. So if we max out permits, it gets us to 10,000. So that's the thought process there.
So to max out each site at capacity, and interesting arrangement that you have with your energy company and the dairy, as you were saying. In that instance, do you own the cows or they own the cows and you just lease the facility, or how does that all work?
They bought the dairy and then prepaid us for the manure that will go into the digester to give us the cash to buy the cows, the feed, and the equipment we needed to make it work. But these dairies were both fairly tired. They had not been actively investing in growing them, so they needed quite a bit of upkeep, and our repair bills have been pretty high. Getting that deal done pre 2022 was really a huge blessing because we bought the cows right. I'd be lying if I said it's been super efficient. We basically doubled in size when we bought the second herd, and you would think you could reduce your cost of production, but we've really struggled to do that. We're holding pretty steady on cost of production, even having increased it a little bit. So that's one of our big challenges before we can really get aggressive on growing. We need to figure out how to carve out about $1 out of our cost of production to get us into like top third of cost of production in the industry. So, and it's work.
So what's the target? Where do you want to be at for your cost of production?
Mid $17 is where we want to be.
So what's it going to take to get there?
When we took over the second herd, we were at about 120 paychecks. We're down to 85 paychecks. I mean, we're doing less things also, right? Like we're not doing the farming. We've outsourced heifer raising. Well, not all the heifer raising, but baby calves. We took over those 2 dairies for the first year and a half. We raised all the wet calves. So we've outsourced that. So some paychecks are carved out. We feel like there's some opportunity in feed cost, and we're working feeding some Plenish beans now. We did a bit of a trial, I guess, May and June this summer. Felt like we saw about a 35-cent advantage in feed cost. And a lot of it didn't come in increased milk production for us. It came in reduced dry matter intake. We bought, I can't remember, 20 or 30,000 bushels of these Plenish beans, and we fed them to the home dairy because we didn't have enough to really feed them for a meaningful period to all the cows. So we just decided to try the one herd. And in the last 2 weeks, we've put a new crop Plenish beans into all the dairies. So we're hoping to reduce feed costs, get this repair budget under control labor. Talking to other guys, we feel like a lot of our competition is not experiencing the turnover that we are. We feel like with the 3 sites, maybe not being able to get our culture driven all the way into the company as effectively as we would like so far. So just a lot of focus on that, trying to reduce this, to figure out why are we turning people over. We feel like we kind of know why we are, but I think that's a big challenge for us right now.
So that's what's it going to take, huh? Looking at those areas to just continue to drill down on that cost of production. And like you said, there's some of that is an area within employees and turnover. And you mentioned culture, and culture is something that you guys take a lot of pride in and have worked really hard on at Swiss Lane. What do you see as the opportunity there to really integrate that culture to the point that it has been in the past?
Fully transparently, I think sometimes you get a little too big for your britches, if you will. You outpace your culture and growth with people, and we don't have the visibility from ownership that we did before we grew with everybody in the company. So I think there's an opportunity there. We have some really great people that are doing a good job, but we need to figure out how to get the culture driven all the way from the top to the bottom. And I wish I had a good answer, Peggy. It's one of those things that we take a lot of pride in. We talk a lot about our core values and our mission, our vision, all these things. But I think we've neglected a few really important things that we just have to drill into and fix.
So is that one of the challenges that you found in scaling is as you have multiple sites and growing the number of people it takes? What's more challenging to figure out how to grow and scale on the number of cows or how to grow and scale culture?
Oh, it's definitely harder to grow and scale culture. There's 100 ways to add cows.
Yes, and you figured out several of them outside of the box ways to add cows.
I tend to not be scared by growth, but sometimes you got to slow down and let your culture catch up with your mission.
So then in your role now, the visionary role, is this part of your job? Is this on your plate, figuring out this piece of the puzzle with employees and culture? Or is that in someone else's department within the leadership team?
It's generally in my cousin Annie. She's our chief people officer. She does a really good job. She's a real champion of our culture, and I'm really thankful for her. But I, as a visionary, I'm also like the head inspirational person in the business. And so I need to be fully behind her initiatives. And sometimes I struggle with that. I want to be out trying to find a way to grow the dairy and get another deal done. But ultimately, I need to take responsibility for it.
So, what do you think is the challenge behind that? You talk about getting another deal, right? When you know that you can go after something, get a paper signed, and you got a plan and it's in alignment with the rest of the plan, like that's a results driven action you can take. But when you look at inspiring people and developing culture, that is slow and has targets that are more difficult to measure. Is that part of the challenge for you and your personality or leadership style? Just the dynamic between the action and the measure and how those come to life between the business and the people side?
Yeah, it's really tough. A big part of driving us a solid culture that reduces turnover is safety is a big part of that. Well, I hate safety initiatives, right? It seems just so boring to me, but it's very critical that you have to show people that you care about them and keep them safe while they're at work and talk about it and be a champion of it. And it just is, it's not what I like to do, but I know how important it is.
Discipline. This comes back to the word discipline, right?
Oh, I would rather go run an ultra marathon than into some of these. And not that I could do that right now, but I would rather train for one. For a lot of people, that seems monotonous compared to some of these culture initiatives that are super important. It's just transparently, I don't like it.
So that's been a challenge that you've run into in your growth as a leader, stepping up into this visionary role. What else has come up? Because you mentioned earlier that you're the ideas person, and sometimes you have to take new ideas to your leadership team, and the buy-in isn't always there right away. Sometimes the ideas you bring forth, as you said in your words, are not always great ideas, but there are good ones in there, right? And that creativity is what has led you to look at how to grow your dairy the way that you have. How has it been to bridge that gap with the other folks on the leadership team when you have an idea? And how are you doing that? How are you bringing your ideas forward?
I feel like that's something I'm still wrestling with and learning is how to bring an idea correctly to a critical thinking leadership team. And yeah, you better have more than just an idea, some research and some anecdotal evidence that this is potentially a good idea. You can't flippantly just say, hey, I think we should start trucking we're paying a lot for trucking. It's not a good way to present an idea.
Has this forced you to learn how to communicate differently, being in a different role?
I feel like I'm still learning, and shoot, it's just been in the last month really that we've moved Ben into the operations manager. And then there's still things on the livestock side that I love buying cows, but it's probably not my job anymore. But I really like it and I still do it. So yeah, handing off some of the operations stuff and not meddling. And there's certain people that I really like to work with, whether it's a builder or whoever it is. I can't just hand off the work and not the relationship. It's got to be both.
How are you doing that? How are you handing off these relationships or essentially transitioning them?
It's hard because some of the relationships you have, they want to talk. A lot of times people want to talk to an owner. And so sometimes it's like, I'm just the wrong person to deal with now. We're not going to get anything done. Sometimes you have to tell them several times, like, hey, Ben's the guy. He's fully capable of answering your questions and making the decision. Like on seed corn, for example, that's a decision he makes. And he's really good at shopping for these different deals, whether it's semen or chemicals or whatever. But they have to respect his spot. And sometimes that's a little tough to get done.
So has that become part of your role in transitioning, that you almost have to kind of train or coach the vendors and those relationships on the change itself, and then back up your person that you brought in? As you mentioned, Ben's the one that is calling the shots in some areas. Have you owned that part of the transition? How can you be intentional about making sure you back yourself out of these relationships and reinforce the new person in that role?
I haven't done a perfect job of that. It's still a work in progress, I guess. But yes, I recognize how important it is. And I recognize that he's capable. Sometimes I feel like I'm being helpful and I'm actually just creating chaos.
What does your day to day look like now? What does it really mean to be in a visionary role for a dairy business?
Yeah, I think I'm learning, Peggy. I'm actually seeking out other people in that role to see how they do it, even off the dairy in other businesses. I'm reading some books. I'm attending a lot of meetings, trying to figure out which ones I need to be at, which ones I don't. I'm really involved with 2 digester projects. So I'm dealing with a lot of the background of that. I'm trying to hand off all of the operational side of that to Ben and still keep some of the design, conceptual, relational with some of the people where it's necessary. So I'm still finding my way through that, I would say. I don't feel like I can tell you I've got it figured out what a visionary's day should look like on a dairy.
So, how much of your day now involves cows?
Very little. I'm more worried about what the barns look like, the output numbers, than I am in the barn.
And is that the right fit for you? Are you finding that you're missing pieces of what you did before? Or is this new normal? Is this your sweet spot?
I think it will be. Yeah, I really do think it will be. But getting all of the responsibilities and accountabilities handed off is what I'm hoping to do through the first quarter of 2025. And then we have a lot of other projects planned and trying to figure out how to execute those. So I do think it will be the best fit for my skills.
You talked about the no matter what statement when the leadership team at Swiss Lane decided to focus at that time. It was a 7,000 cows in 7 years goal. And so I'm going to pull that statement back here, the no matter what statement. As you look at handing off some of those relationships, changing your day to day, really making the full shift into your new role, is it kind of a no matter what once again? This decision to make these changes to the way you spend your time and your talent?
Yep. And so it's going to be who are the people that I need to be in front of every week. And some of it's going to be teams of people in our business that I need to be in front of at the right interval to really help drive the vision of the company from top to bottom.
And the culture, like you talked about also.
Culture, vision, the whole, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned two things that you are doing to help yourself as you step into your new role. One of them is reading some books. The other is having some conversations with others, whether it's dairy or non-dairy businesses that are in a visionary seat. So I'm curious what you've been reading and what you've been learning. Let's start with the books. What's the most impactful piece of material you've listened to or read that's been helping you out?
The one that's been really helpful here in the early going, kind of this whole transition, is Rocket Fuel. Gino Wickman wrote it. It describes the visionary and the integrator and the relationship and how they work together in a business. It's been really good. And I've read it and I've listened to it a couple of times. That one's been really helpful.
That was Rocket Fuel.
Rocket Fuel is what that one's called. And then Good to Great by Jim Collins, another one that's just really, really good. Built to Last is his other one. Those have been really good books as we try to structure our business in a way that's going to stick around, right?
And then on the conversation side, who are the types of people that you've been connecting with, and what have you been learning that you've been able to take with you and put into action?
Well, other people that are visionary types, as I see, other leaders of dairies, and then visionaries of some other companies, builders, and some other people. I think really just trying to learn how they spend their time,
Mm.
really. Who are they talking to? What are they reading? What are they listening to? And all of that. What are their disciplines? What are they doing to stay physically active and fit? Because I think that's a pretty important piece. I'm not doing physical work on the dairy like I used to. And so making sure I keep my brain working right by keeping my body working is important. So making sure I have accountability to that.
So, what have you taken away from these conversations? What are a couple of gold nuggets that you really have jotted down or made mental notes of that you are utilizing?
I actually wrote a couple notes. Some of the challenges for visionary types is staying focused. I heard it in a book or in a conversation. Basically, my personality type stops listening to somebody if they can't make their point in 30 seconds. And so it's really a challenge because then you stop listening to somebody and then they don't feel heard and then they don't feel cared for. So that's a real challenge, something I have to really focus on focusing, on conversations, on people's needs. The other thing that's kind of my personality type is unrealistic optimism. For me, everything seems possible. And there's a lot of people that just don't think that way. You don't want to lose that either, because I think that's one of the things that really does help drive our business. But any strength overused is a weakness. A potential problem is giving your organization organizational whiplash. Like, our focus is on milking cows. We're good at milking cows. We're going to continue to grow in the dairy industry. That's our mission. If all of a sudden I'm all excited about whatever it is, to over focus on even the digester projects, even though they're really important to what we're doing, we have to get these things built. People will pivot and look to where I'm looking, right? Or where our leadership team is looking. And if I'm steering the business here and then I get bored, so then I'm over here on something else, it creates a lot of chaos in the business and then doesn't help you focus on what you should be focusing on. So those are a couple things. I think, one of the kind of the nuggets that I really liked is in one of the books that says that visionaries are hunters. So you're hunting for ideas, for deals, for opportunities. One of the abilities of a visionary is the ability to navigate in the fog, right? Without guideposts. And I feel like that is how I'm wired. I don't get too worried about where we're going. I don't have to see clearly as long as we're moving forward. That's probably why our cost of production is too high, as I haven't let the business slow down enough to catch up to that yet. We've added 700 cows in the last year. So our management has to catch up to our growth, I guess.
And that's hard because that means you have to slow down just long enough, right? And
Right.
slowing down and being in the same spot is not your comfort zone, is it? Do you have people on your team? Because I know you guys have done a lot of extensive personality assessments and things like that really value consistency.
Yeah, several of them actually. My brother is that way. Ben is that way. Brian, our CFO, is that way. There's some pretty neat tools that we've used. I can't remember what it's called, but basically it fleshes out how much information somebody needs to make a decision. I need almost none. Like, you have an idea, give me 3 bullet points of why we should do it. Well, let's do it. My brother needs all of the information and then some. So it's really good. But so we're kind of all over the map on that. Knowing that's really important because I could end up really frustrated all the time if I was like, why aren't we doing any of these things? It's like, well, people don't have enough information.
And that's where you have learned, like, this is what they need to buy in, and this is what you might need to provide. That in the past, if you're the one calling the shots, you're like, bing, bang, boom, don't need all the details, but I know it's the right thing. Well, now you have to present and not just be the decision maker. You have to get the buy-in. We have covered the change in your role, some of the challenges that have come along the way. And what I think people appreciate about you, and what I appreciate about you too, is just the honesty. And I know that there's going to be some of our friends out there listening too that are in a similar spot or can relate to things that you shared today, Tommy. I want to make sure we also focus on some of the wins. When you look at the transition that you've made and just take a step back, what are you most proud of? If you could pick out a few things that you're most proud of for the farm, for the business, for personal in the past few months, what are your wins?
The hardest thing we've done is navigating the transition plan from
Mm.
my dad's generation to ours. And seeing my dad and his 2 brothers working together almost every day outside of the business. They have lunch together several times a week. When one of them's working on a project, the others are all helping them. I'm really proud of that they're kind of happily, I hate to use the word retired, but that's fitting, I guess, happily retired from their roles as the visionaries, integrators, and operators of the dairy. They're still critical for advice. There's just a lot of things that we still, covet their experience. And so that's something that I think the most proud of. Those relationships that had the biggest potential to derail our whole endeavor. And I'm really proud of my partners, Matt and Annie. They're really good partners and they really care about our business. We care for each other, and just thankful for them and their talents because they have skill sets that we need. If it was just me, I'd be in trouble, likely.
This is where you complement each other.
I am proud of our ability to overcome the succession plan that was really difficult to administrate and get done and still grow. I'm proud that we've hit some of our growth targets and been able to do some really unique things. We've gotten some really good opportunities. So those would be the wins, and our ability to come together. We all think very differently, but to come together and drive the ball the same direction. I could focus for days on the things that we haven't done and where we've made some bad decisions and things like that. But at the end of the day, we're still on our feet. We're still in the arena. We're still fighting, clawing, sweating, bleeding. It's to be competitive in this market.
What I see and hear when you share this, Tommy, is also you know what you're fighting for. The vision is very clear, the goals are very clear, and they're communicated, and that's what you're going after. And there's a plan. Now you have 3 sites that you have the ability to go up to 3,500 cows at each site. The next steps, it's just fine tuning the details along the way to get there. But it all goes back to what I wanted to pat you and your family on the back for in the first place. And that was, as you said, going through that succession transition planning and being able to enjoy seeing where your dad and your uncle are at. We've talked about those dynamics before here on the podcast, but when you were a kid, did you ever envision that they would actually retire the way that they're retiring from dairy farming?
No, I didn't. So it is pretty neat to see them have some things that they like to do outside of the dairy. They always said their hobby was farming, right? That's all they did. So they found some different things to do and they're enjoying doing it and spending a lot of quality time with their grandkids, which I think is really, really awesome that our kids all have the opportunity to have time to spend with their grandparents. It's not all focused and revolving around the dairy. So that's good.
And so when you talk about those outside activities, things other than farming, and I'm going to revisit a couple of things we've talked about in the past. Usually in January, it's 75 hard, 75-day challenge that you've undergone several times. Some of your running challenges. Everybody's going to want to know, who's been listening and following along as you've been a guest here over the year. Are you doing any of these things again in 2025? And if not, is there something else that you are working on?
We don't have anything on the books officially. The people that I usually do that with, we're obviously all texting and talking about what January is going to bring. It's going to be something, but we don't have anything defined. We don't think we're going to do 75 hard again. We feel like we've done that twice. And well, it was awesome in a lot of ways. I'm in better shape than I usually am coming into Thanksgiving, but I've kept more of my condition off, if you will.
Condition. Your body condition score, you mean?
My body condition score isn't as high as it has been going into the holidays in the past, but
You'd be less valuable as a cull animal right now, is what you're saying.
exactly. But no, so I'm running right now in that 10 to 15 miles a week, not fast. And this time it's interesting, like coming out of summer when days are long. And as the days shorten up, there's a period of time where I feel like my body just likes to keep every calorie I consume.
I think it's something to do with winter in the upper Midwest. I have the same problem. And I mean, it has nothing to do with Christmas cookies. But okay, Tommy, I have an idea for your 75 challenge for what you're going to do in 2025. You're going to do 75 soft. And 75 soft is going to be practicing soft skills for 75 days. So you talked about how challenging it is for you to think about things like some of the culture stuff and the people stuff and the safety stuff and all that. I challenge you for 75 days to spend 10 minutes intentionally working on a soft skill in 2025.
I like it. We'll have to have a little bit of I'll have to send you a contract.
Yes, you send me a contract and you tell me what it's going to look like of how you're going to improve your soft skills in 2025. It sounds way easier to just give up eating sugar, doesn't it?
It sounds easier to do all that than it does, to focus on the things I hate.
Well, there you go. I'm laying it out.
I like it.
But as always, it's always so fun to catch up with you, Tommy. And I just, as I said before, I just know that we can expect you to be real and to be relatable. And just so grateful that you're willing to spend your time with us here on Up Level Dairy Podcast and share a little bit about what's going on in your world. And congratulations on the wins and the progress and doing the hard things there at Swiss Lane Farms.
Thanks, Peggy. It's always an honor to be a guest with you. It's awesome.
We'll have you back in late March. Is that 75 days to hear about the 75 Soft Skills Challenge?
I like it. I can't wait for the conversation.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Tommy.
This episode is sponsored by Up Level Dairy Podcast founding partner Adisseo, a global leader in nutrition solutions and premier provider of rumen-protected methionine for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from components, and maintain the health of their high-performing herds. Feed is the greatest expense on any dairy operation, and don't you want to know how an adjustment to the ration will affect your bottom line? Adisseo empowers nutritionists to make informed ration balancing decisions with MilkPay.com. Customizable to your dairy's own data, this profitability calculator puts the power of real-time milk market information in the palm of your hand. Find out how much your latest ration change is really costing you with the free MilkPay app available on iOS and through milkpay.com.
You just heard from Tommy Oesch at Swiss Lane Farms on the changes and the challenges of going from operations manager to the lead visionary for Swiss Lane Farms and the vision to be at 10,000 cows by 2032. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you drop a rating or review. Those 5-star ratings and kind reviews allow us to keep the show going and growing. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thank you for listening to the Up Level Dairy Podcast.